welcome, and friends, family members, associates, interns, venture partners, mentors, sponsors, and of course, founders. On behalf of Adeo Ressi and Jonathan Greachin, who lead the Founder Institute internationally, along with Chris Clark, Cheryl Mack, Phoebe Zhang, and Paul Krajewski, my fellow Australia-New Zealand co-directors. My name is Benjamin Chong, and I'd like to welcome you to this special event, the graduation of the Autumn 2022 group of Founder Institute. We live in interesting times, and what we're celebrating tonight is the achievement of some very special founders who have met the challenge of building a meaningful and enduring technology company. Our agenda tonight is meant to be informative. We're wanting to share with you a little bit about the Founder Institute, about the journey that these founders have been on over the last 3 months. We'll then hear from a friend of the Institute, someone who has been through the program before and who is the CEO of Australian technology company, Eric Frost. And then we'll get an opportunity to hear from the founders. We'll hear their pitch. We'll hear how they've been impacted by the program over the last 3 months. And then there'll be a time of celebration. So I'm very much looking forward to tonight, and I thank you for joining us. Now, sometimes people ask me, what is the Founder Institute? And I'll say the Founder Institute is a group of mentors worldwide who help founders build meaningful and enduring technology companies. Well, what the Founder Institute would say officially is that they're the world's most proven network to turn ideas into fundable startups and startups into global businesses. And I think some of the stories that we'll hear from Eric tonight will helpfully give us the perspective of what the Founder Institute equips founders to do, but also as founders in a challenging world, what are some experiences, what are some tips, what are some things for us to hold close to our hearts as we face those challenges and hopefully become better. Since 2009, the Founder Institute, through its structured accelerator program, has helped over 6,000 entrepreneurs raise over $1.75 billion in funding. Based in Silicon Valley and with chapters across 95 countries, our mission is to empower communities of talented and motivated people to build impactful technology companies worldwide. And it all starts with our renowned core program. And it's this core program which pushes founders at the idea and pre-seed stages to reach milestones needed for investment and sustained growth. Now, it's this core program that the founders that we are celebrating tonight have been through. It's been a grueling 3 months. And why don't I take you back to the very beginning of the program? In the start, our founders were exposed to orientation, where they heard about the Founder Institute program structure, its methodology, its tools and requirements. Remember that first session where you got to meet fellow founders on this journey, and how you're trying to figure out how this program would help push you to move your business forward. That was followed by the next day, where we had mentors talk about vision and how important vision is for your business. How having a strong vision helps you get up in the morning with energy, with verve, even though you've had a late night working hard the night before. And it was also in that vision session you got experience with your first feedback session, where you were pitching to mentors and you received that hot seat feedback from mentors. And you'll also recall that in those early weeks, what we said is that our desire is for mentors to give you feedback that is honest, that is direct, so that you're best able to make changes. You're able to benefit from that very quickly. We then moved into customer development, where you heard from mentors who were talking about how to understand customer problems clearly and in a way that you're able to hopefully answer. These mentors tested some of your key assumptions. They provided feedback on how to interview potential customers effectively and also how to interpret the feedback that you receive. We later moved into revenue, where you got exposed to different mentors sharing their various revenue models and how you could test those various revenue models with your customers. And then a few weeks later, one of the big checkpoints of the program was the mentor idea review, where there was a panel of over 10 mentors. You got to pitch twice to the panel of mentors, and they provided you feedback on the long-term viability of your offering, of your revenue model, of your growth strategy, and of course, your presentation skills. It wasn't long after that mentor idea review, you got introduced to the fine startup lawyers with huge commercial experience, but also deep startup experience from Addison's. And I believe we've got Kieran and Rebecca today from Addison's. Thank you very much for your ongoing support of the Founder Institute program. It's been wonderful that you've been able to be part of the journey of the startup lives of many of our founders, and we very much appreciate the support that you, Rebecca, Karen, and Kieran have provided to the folk here. And of course, it was during that session we went through various legal agreements, cap tables, intellectual property. How do you best work with a law firm? And then, of course, you've got some ratings and feedback on your startup pitches and progress. After that, we got into go-to-market plans. It's all wonderful to have a product that seems to meet the desires of the customer. But how do you go to market? How do you craft the right marketing message? How do you think about unit economics, about customer acquisition that is hopefully repeatable? And then we moved into hiring and onboarding. How do you build a team so that you have a truly sustainable business? What's your plan to recruit, to onboard and retain the best people? What are the roles you'll need, not only now, but as the business progresses? And then, of course, towards the back end, we spoke about equity and funding. What are the thresholds to various levels of funding? What do you need to garner the attention of angels, of venture capitalists? Or even, what are the steps that you need to take to ensure that if you bring on money from family and friends, you're doing so in a way that's going to set up the company for success, but also ensure that they're brought along appropriately for the ride? These are all the things that you have been through over the last 3 months. It's been a full-on program. And the good news is this: there are a number of post programs for you. Virtual advisory programs that have been curated by our Silicon Valley headquarters to help you reach your milestones. There's the Funding Lab to help you get your lead investor within the next 6 months. There's the Product Market Fit Lab that's beginning very shortly to help you get greater levels of product market fit. And then there's the Founder Institute Venture Network to help syndicate your deal to accredited investors. These are all the things that you can look forward to in coming months. And the fellow co-directors and I look forward to working with you to identify and to get you into the most appropriate program as you build your business. We thought that it would be fitting at this stage for me to tell you a little bit about a friend of the Institute and a friend of mine, Eric Frost. After graduating from Cornell University, he decided to join that giant financial services firm, American Express, where he spent some 14 years, initially in New York and then in Sydney. And it was while Eric was in Sydney with American Express, he decided that the world of startups would be terribly interesting. He took part in one of the early cohorts of the Founder Institute in Sydney, and we had wonderful times having beer and on hot seats. And he then decided to start a business called Simple Money, but then later came up with a change. And the change was to shift the company. Instead of helping people get access to money, it was helping financiers process the applications of their customers who wanted to get access to money more easily. And that's the genesis of Simple KYC, which provides significant automation for onboarding commercial entities and meeting anti-money laundering, know your customer requirements. Simple KYC has a range of customers both here and overseas now. And it's my privilege to say, welcome, Eric. Would love to hear from you and to hear a little bit more about your story and some of the feedback and the reflections you have as a founder. Over to you, Eric.
Thanks, Ben. Hi, everyone. You're gonna have to tell me where you got that picture, Ben. I'm very curious. So what I thought I'd do is just share a few stories. Ben's already given you background on me, so what I thought I'd do is just share some stories with a bit of emphasis on the early days, and hopefully I'll point out some mistakes I've made and things that you can sort of learn from these stories. So as Ben mentioned, I did the Founders Institute many years ago. I think it's almost 10 or 9 years ago. I think I was part of the second cohort post-launch. And I had started a business called Simple Money out of the program. It was an idea that I had based on personal experience, and what I was trying to do was really sort of leverage my background in finance and apply that in a startup, thinking that by applying what I had known and had some special knowledge on that would help me create some boundaries between us and a lead up over competition. And it was in the early days, really before fintech had taken off in Australia. So I did the program 13 weeks. And by the way, I was just looking at the agenda, and it's amazing because I think 13 things on your program agenda, which I do remember doing, are all things that you continue through with the life of your company, no matter what stage, where you're just constantly refining it. So, nowadays, vision is more around vision and explaining that to your entire company and your customer base. And pitching, you're constantly explaining and trying to get your staff to learn how to pitch. Go to market might be new markets or countries, but that's a sidetrack. So with Simple Money, I had done that for about a year and a half, 2 years, really sort of post Founder Institute. And I did it on the side while I was working, and I had a day job. So I was sort of taking all the money I got from my day job and sort of funneling it into the business. I had outsourced all the technology, and I joined a co-founder also out of the Founder Institute, who joined me on the journey, and he was working full time, and it sort of led up the tech side. But as I started getting going, the idea just really never came to fruition. I had gone over to the US and had tracked a few companies that were doing something similar. We were just in Australia, we weren't competing. The companies in the US had no desire to go into Australia. So they were willing to share information. And it was in the small business lending space. And I think I realized out of that that it just wasn't the right startup for me, because it was small business lending is just really hard, definitely hard at the time, and still is, to really sort of digitize. And what I found is that the companies doing it in the US still had large call centers, and they were really sort of trying to use technology, but they just couldn't move small business onto tech stacks, and they just couldn't really figure out how to solve that. And I thought that really wasn't a business I wanted. But another thing that sort of fell over on it was, my co-founder um, just really wasn't a good match. And I think, lesson learned is, and it wasn't quite apparent at first. There might have been signs, but just sort of through that work experience, ended up not being the best match for me. So I spent quite a lot of money on that startup, which I ended up losing all of that, and a lot of time and energy. But I gained a huge amount of knowledge out of that experience. And through that experience, I met my current co-founder in another business, Neil, who was also part of the Founder Institute. And he had done a startup also in the Founder Institute that was successful to the end. And we sort of merged together. And I took those learnings and applied it into the company that I started now about 7 years ago, called Simple KYC. It took us about 30 seconds to name it. I just went Simple Money to Simple KYC, and got Neil on board. And then, because the technology, the outsourcing was another big mistake that I had done before, which really just didn't work. And I remember in Founder Institute, a lot of the advisors said, "Don't outsource your tech," and they were definitely right. I couldn't get that model to work. I mean, there might be some hybrid ways to do it, but it really, even now when we've tried outsourcing, we've just been really a real struggle to get that sort of model to work when you're doing a scaling business. But yeah, look, so we went heavy on co-founders on the tech side. So 2 co-founders, one was in New York. He subsequently moved to Madrid. He grew up in Spain. We're now, after 7 years, about 100 staff located in 3 countries, so Australia, the Philippines, and Spain. We do most of our technology out of Spain. That's been a real competitive edge for us. It's been quite easy to scale compared to sort of our counterparts and other technology businesses in Australia. It's very hard to grow and scale your tech businesses in Australia with the talent pool and just cost of salaries and so on and so on. So we've ended up finding that to be really good. But the Founder Institute, again, another lesson learned. It just really pushed me outside my comfort zone. I remember being very nervous every week pitching. That just sort of caused me to really push me outside my comfort zone, and learning to network and learning. And these are all things that you have to do in the early days of your startup. And it was the same with Simple KYC. In the early days, it was just a lot of fun. Bouncing ideas around. We came up with a huge number of product ideas. We were very agile building, where I was doing product, Neil and Brandon were doing the tech side. I was doing all the conversations with potential customers, trying to learn as much as we created the product around the pain points. I think the space we're in, we target large enterprise, so the big 4 banks all the way down to sort of law firms and small fintechs. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of information on what the pain points are. So the only way to obtain what the pain points and work through the solution is to be extremely very close to customers. And also, from the experience I had from Simple Money and the failure there, applied a lot. I attacked every problem I had and tried to overcompensate by solving for it strategically. So we got on a advisor to really, who is a CEO who was just in between gardening leave from one job to the next, got involved, and he invested in our business. We ended up partnering and taking an investment from a very large company in our space, and data provider, backed by private equity. Really, like I said, really overcompensated on the tech side, and really just sort of got off to a very good start. I think didn't raise a whole lot of money, raised about 1.3 million was our seed capital before we got started. At the time, it was pretty good because the startup scene was sort of new. There weren't a lot of investors in Australia, certainly no big funds or anything. We got started. We signed up American Express, who was my former employer, ANZ Bank in New Zealand, and Westpac in New Zealand. So all three of them, we were probably the first pre-revenue company that they ever started working with as a vendor. And it was no small feat. But out of that, we definitely sort of suffered. When you go into that enterprise space, you end up getting pulled in a lot of different directions, and it's a great experience because they really love working with startups if you're the right people, because they love the agility that we could bring, but they also bring you down a certain path that is not necessarily the smartest path, where we started doing specialized work. Like American Express couldn't get enough of what we were building and doing. We were in their good books, and almost becoming a tech vendor for them in a much bigger way. And you sort of need to, we learned through that we needed to make sure we stuck to our vision and stuck on course, because when you get into these big enterprises, there's so many different problems that they have, and they're looking for solutions, and you can easily go very many different directions. So we ended up, after sort of a lot of advice, just sort of pulling out and just trying to stick back to our original focus, and also really trying to stick as a SaaS business, really try and drive subscription revenue. A lot of our business was funded, to be fair, by one-off payments and build fees, but as a SaaS business, we realized that we needed to go where we were valued, which is basically on subscription revenue. So we ended up really sort of switching our course after about 3 or 4 years to have a huge focus on subscription revenue. Another big lesson I sort of learned through this whole process was we got some money from a existing provider who sold our solution, and unfortunately it worked out really well in the beginning, but we signed an exclusive arrangement with them, which means we didn't have the ability to go direct to market, and that ultimately didn't scale for us. So it worked fantastic for the first year or two, but when you've got someone else selling your solution, they're not nearly as passionate as you are. They don't have the subject matter expertise. There is just no quick win in that regard, at least from what I've experienced and know, to find someone who's bigger who can just sell your solution. It just doesn't work. Also, I talked to M&A people, and that's probably something also early on or midway to sort of make sure what your exit value looks like, and how companies think about you when they might buy you in the future. And this M&A person had told me that it's much better valuation if it's direct revenue rather than through a channel partner. So we ended up ending that exclusivity and going direct, and we've about 2 years ago, and we've really sort of exploded, where we've doubled our customer numbers, quadrupled or maybe times 5 our revenue from exiting that relationship. But also, when you get money from a large corporate, you definitely need to think about your venture capital, where you're getting from it. Obviously, it's just sort of good to get some capital to invest, but it's important to understand those investors, make sure there's alignment. Getting it from a corporate, and I've heard this from startup to startup who has got money from corporates, that it's usually not strategic. They're usually not very involved in the business, and that's been our experience. It's neither bad nor good, but of course, some angel investors and venture capitalists, they can be really great and provide a lot of great advice and be a little bit hands off, or they can be very, very involved, which could also be good, but often they take director seats and can be bad for your business and steer you the wrong way as well. So, another consideration as you guys are sort of going in and launching your businesses is to think about who you get capital from, and trying to get the right capital, some smart capital to help you help position you for the future. So I guess that's sort of the early days and some of the things I learned. Where we're at now, so 7 years on, we are a profitable business, about 100 people. We've mostly done business in Australia, New Zealand. We've dabbled outside, but we've just come against barriers where, I think in the beginning days, go to market is a lot cheaper than it is when you become a 100-person company. It's much harder. You have to build up a little bit of an army to go into a new market, or whether it's a new market segment or a new country. And I think that's probably one of the hard lessons I've learned, is that I thought we could just sort of replicate what we do and go into Europe or the United States. But unfortunately, it really takes sort of founders who are well-versed and very passionate and willing to work the extra hours and do anything. And most of all, just usually very flexible in the nature of the type of the work, and willing to learn anything to really sort of go to market as a small team. What I've learned is you have to have a certain amount of expense that you build towards your product. You have to get a product specialist. You have to get your tech team. You have to get sales and marketing. All those things have to line up, and it's a much more expensive exercise. So we're at a stage where we haven't raised capital since our seed round, but we're at a stage now where we've realized if we want to go into a new country, we're going to have to start raising a significant amount of capital to make that happen. And as well as the scene is very different, where a lot of companies in our space have raised capital. We sort of fit in the RegTech space, which is a hot one, and a lot of capital has flown into RegTechs globally around. Some of the other challenges that we've sort of failed is there's just no shortage in challenges when you're trying to scale your business. When you're early days, you're trying to build the MVP, you're just trying to get going, land those few customers. But when you do that, you're sort of taking shortcuts. You're probably not documenting what you build. You're building the fastest thing possible and not necessarily robust. And with that, it creates a lot of legacy in terms of your technology that you need to rebuild. And the people you hire later on weren't there in the early days, so they may not understand that code base. You might be using older versions of code, creating legacy code. Then you've got the challenges of people. The people in the early days that your founders and your early employees are probably more creative types, or more agile, and they don't necessarily survive and are the best when you're at a late, sort of mid stage. I wouldn't say we're late stage, but more mid stage. You need more. We're at a stage where we need a lot of process, a lot of structure. Building is slower. Thinking about the market is a bit slower. Everything's just a notch slower, and that's not necessarily what people involved like at a later stage. So you have to sort of figure out how to map the stage you're at in the company and how to navigate through that in terms of your personnel, your technology, how you think about customers, and so on. But sort of to just wrap it up, definitely enjoy your post Founder Institute. I certainly got a tremendous out of the program. It transformed me. Definitely learned a lot. I think everything you learn through it is essentially the core things that you need to get a business started and to manage it through a business through the life cycle. But it's a lot of fun in the beginning, and it sort of, some of that fun does change. It depends what you like, but I think I certainly found it a lot of fun in the beginning when you're in that ideation phase and enjoying things. So make sure you enjoy it. It's incredibly difficult, but definitely make sure while you're doing it that you enjoy it and learn and build off it.
What do you do to gain perspective and to recharge?
Like, I think I've probably done it harder than most. I think because we haven't raised a lot of money through our life, that's probably a lot harder path than raising a seed and then a Series A. And I mean, as long as we've been around, we probably should be at a Series B right now, given the maturity of our company. So I think that I know a lot of other founders, and they probably have a little more time off than I do. But that said, it's difficult for everyone. So how do I recharge? One, I definitely try to exercise quite regularly. COVID wasn't great for vacation. I took a vacation lately, and that was really excellent. I sort of try to set up a schedule, a calendar for myself that, leaves Saturdays completely free, no touching work, certain things like that, to try and create separation between work and home. But it's incredibly challenging. When I'm off, I make sure I don't touch my phone or have any work apps going, or any access to anything works, and try to be in the moment as much as possible.
So just in relation to bringing on co-founders, because you had a number, I actually lost count, but you brought on a number. Did you ever worry about, how do I put this? Were they going to pull their weight in the same way as you were?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I read a book by a Harvard professor on I can't remember the name of the book. But I read this, and it was about how do you divide your equity up, and he'd done some empirical studies on some data points he had. Like, I guess I put money in, my other two co-founders did not, and then we just split the equity three ways, which is evenly for the workers component, and that was a big worry. And I had just told myself, and you might look at, that's definitely not necessarily the right. You sort of have to look at how to split that equity based on what everyone's bringing. But I sort of said, this is what I'm doing, and I'm never going to look back. And if I got it wrong, I got it wrong. And it's just, you just have to sort of move on, because at the end of the day, what matters is whether you're successful. Because if you are successful, everyone's going to make more than enough money. And you probably every startup, everyone looks back and goes, was it fair or not? Probably no one ever thinks it's fair in the end. You're probably not going to reach a fair deal. But what's important is that you're successful in the end.
Good to know.
Thanks, Amanda.
I don't think that's an easy question, though. It's just my thought. So.
And what's the number one thing you learned or advantage you gained from going through FI?
Yeah, for me, the number one thing was just, and this is probably speaking to, my own personal limitations. I was sort of the pitching and getting myself out there, and I think before FI, I was sort of, my confidence came from domain expertise. And FI sort of forced me to put myself out there in a domain which I'd never been in before, startup world, and the product I was trying to create, and it sort of forced me to get over those nerves and get going. So had I not done FI, to be honest, I don't know if I would have always wanted to do my own startup. I don't know if how I would have gotten there. So it was that real bridge I'd been looking for, to go from, nice, cozy job in a very large company, but desiring to do my own business, to actually doing it. So it was a very good bridge, and really helped me sort of solve for my own personal limitations.
But it's time for me to thank you. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for those words of wisdom, and to hear that you still have that passion and that desire to want to solve the problems of customers like you have in Australia and New Zealand, in lots of other countries around the world. And it's seven years in. So thank you very much, Eric. I've taken much out of your talk, and I hope our founders have as well. And it's therefore time to hear from the incoming president of the alum of this autumn 2022 cohort, Amanda Falconer. Over to you, Amanda.
Thank you very much. Great to be here and speaking, to a whole group of people I can't see, but also on behalf of our cohort, the ones that are not here but began with us, and of course the ones that remain. On the weekend, my cousin did another Ironman. And for those of you who don't know what that involves, it's about a 3.9K swim, about 170K ride, and about a 42K or so run. And coincidentally, another friend of mine just flew off this morning to swim the English Channel. Now, there's a lot of preparation that goes into those events and those races, and over the 11 or so hours that they're going to take to do them, there's obviously a lot of determination and resilience that those people need to show. And I think, we can really imagine what must go on over 11 hours, peaks and troughs and challenges, and I can't do it, and oh, I'm feeling great, and all of that stuff. Now, some of you might be wondering why I'm actually sharing that with you. And it's because I often think that starting and running a business is enormously like an endurance sport. We just don't get the same kind of kudos. But, as I listened to Eric, I thought, well, there is an endurance sport played out over 7 years. Of course, there are some ways in which running a business or our kind of endurance is very different from an 11-hour race, because hopefully our businesses last for longer than 11 hours. But they also demand, as well as resilience, they demand creativity and problem solving and a whole stack of things, which I think can sometimes go unnoticed when we just read those business stories about how much value a business has today. And it certainly came home to me listening to Eric. And I think coming to the Founder Institute program particularly, it's very clear that the structure of the program is absolutely designed by people who intimately understand what it actually takes to build and grow a business. The whole program is designed to, particularly for those in the launch track, to take an idea, to pressure test it, to shape it, to then launch it, and then grow it, and then all of the things that go on after that. And as Eric said, many of the things that you do in the first program, you're going to kind of repeat at various times in the life cycle of the business. And in fact, one of my colleagues said that FI, as a first-time founder, FI proved to be a perfect place to enter the startup world. The time it would have taken me to go it alone, to meet the network and gain the structure that FI provided, saved me at least a year of work while keeping me accountable and on track. So I don't think there's any doubt for any of us that if you apply yourself to the structured program in a way that treats it not like homework, but as a series of really good things for you to, ask yourself and think through that are going to make your business better, then that's the way that you will get the most out of it. Secondly, I also asked the rest of my cohort for their number one highlight of the program. And it was interesting that, really almost universally at the top of the list was meeting and working with other founders. And again, the program does design in that kind of interaction. Of course, you are put into groups, you're given assignments to work on, and then you're rotated out of that before you get too stuck and comfortable. And then you've got to form a new group and manage those relationships. And of course, for those of us who are solo founders, and also those of us who are not natural collaborators, I count myself here, being put into groups is actually a really good thing for getting you out of your comfort zone in that regard, and also getting you out of the ivory tower. Well, I can't finish this short talk and without acknowledging and thanking mentors and local leaders. You know, it really is the people, both the presenters and the mentors outside of that, who really make the program valuable. The structure is one thing, but of course it's the people who put the colour and the richness in that. So I do want to take a moment to thank all of you on behalf of the cohort, again, those who aren't here and those of us who remain, for your generosity and knowledge. We really do appreciate it. Now, if there is one thing that could have made it better, because I also asked the cohort, what is the one constructive feedback or piece of constructive feedback you would like to give FI? And that is really, and you can take this really as a compliment, that people wanted more access to you. I think in the early days when there are 50 of us, then having 15-minute office hours slots makes complete sense. But as we whittled down to 9, I think what people felt was that 15 minutes doesn't really cut it, and that they would love to have more time with you. And some have also asked, could it be, you know, could we be assigned a mentor? Oh my goodness, I timed this and I've gone over. So in one final thing I would say is that, of course, there were those among you who did give us that extra time, who spent lots of time with us. I know we all had those experiences, so we really do thank you deeply for that. I think finally, it's with a mixture really of relief, satisfaction and gratitude that we graduate from this cohort of FI. So thanks, Ben.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Amanda, and kind words, and thank you